We'll continue the Maimer Vayakhel, the Maimer that the Rebbe said Shabbos Parshas Vayakhel Tafshin Yud Beis. Sorry we missed a few days. We'll continue from where we left off. In the Maimer, we began to explain the idea of Sheishes Yamim Te'aseh Melacha. And that Te'aseh means that the work is done as if on its own. And the Rebbe explained it by explaining the concept of Yigia Kapecha, the toil of your hands. And the Rebbe explains that the difference between when is something called a Yigia, when is it considered that it's hard work, when a person doesn't have pleasure in it. When a person enjoys doing something, it's not a yigia, it's not hard work. And with this, the Rebbe explained that when a person's working, the work that he does isn't something that he should have his enjoyment and his pleasure in. And also, it's like Sheishes Yamim Teyas, it's like it's done on its own because that's not where his mind is, that's not where his head is. His head is in Torah and mitzvahs and stealing time for learning Torah, etc. So to understand this, to explain it a little more, because in a way, it would seem like there's two opposite things that we have in our world. On one hand, Chassidus always tells us that the Eibishter wants us to be down here, and that's something which we've learned many times in the previous Mamarim, that the Dira Batachtoinim is down here in the most physical world. It's with physical work, not just Torah and mitzvahs, but B'chol D'Rachecha Deyu. Everything a person does, he finds Hashem in it. And on the contrary, where can a person reach Atzma specifically when he's involved in the physical work, in the physical labor, in the physical world? Now we seem to be saying a different point. Yegia, it's hard work, it's toil. My pleasure isn't there. It's teyaseh, it's as if it's done on its own because it's not where my head is. What does that mean? How do we explain this? So to try and explain it, and based also on the concepts which are in the Maimer, which by the way, almost the entire Maimer is Muga, was edited by the Rebbe in Likutei Siches Chelek Aleph, Parshas Vayakhel. This is the Maimer, but the Maimer was edited as a Sicha and Likutei Siches. Al Kol Panim, with regard to the idea, let's take a look first at what we're talking about over here, because we're talking about Shabbos, and that's in fact one of the questions that I've asked, what's so special about Shabbos? That we say Teyaseh, Sheishes Yamim Teyaseh Malacha, and that there has to be a Vayakhel, that Moshe has to gather all the Jews together for Shabbos. And in addition, we learned about Shabbos already earlier. Why are we repeating again the mitzvah of Shabbos? And another question was, why does it say Shabbos Shabbosing? What is Shabbos? And what's the weekdays? And it's something, in fact, that in a sense we learned it in the last Maimer, which is Parshas Parah Tafshin Yud Aleph. In the previous Maimer that we learned about Ratzu and Shuv. Ratzu and Shuv is the real existence of the world. The existence of the world is in a way that Hashem constantly recreates the world. And because Hashem is constantly recreating the world, there's a concept of Ratzu and Shuv, which means there's the godly chayas, the sustenance from Hashem that comes into the world, then it leaves, and then it comes back in. And that idea is what we call Ratzu and Shuv, which means that a person, because of this, has a constant yearning to want to connect to this source, Ratzu, and then Shuv, he comes down and he involves himself in this physical world because that's the purpose of creation. And we see that in everything, the world itself, especially in a person, B'chira Nivraim. We look at a person's heartbeat, we look at breathing, we look at the whole concept of time. It's all a back and forth, because that's the way everything in our lives is all about. Now this Ratzu V'Shuv is especially expressed by the fact that we have two aspects in our life. There's the world that we live in, and that we have to live in, although it's al karcha chatochai, in a certain sense that world is against our will, The neshama doesn't want to be down here. The neshama wants to be connected to Hashem. But al karchach atachai, we're forced. Forced by whom? The Mishnah says al karchach atachai. It's against your will, you're alive. Who's forcing you? It's a very amazing thing that Chassidus explains. A Jew can't be forced by anyone to do anything. A Jew is chelek eloikam imal mamish. Hashem doesn't get forced, God forbid. Neither does a Jew. Who forces us? We force ourselves. The neshama itself, when it recognizes the great advantage that there is and the great elevation that results from being down here in the physical world, al karchach, he forces himself against his better judgment, so to speak, or not better judgment, against his natural desire that the neshama naturally wants to be connected to spirituality. It doesn't want to be in the physical world. But the neshama pushes itself to be in the physical world because of the great achievement that there is in the physical world, that it's only here that we reach Atzmos. So on one end, it's al karchach atachai, we're here, we're in a physical world, a world that every essence and every existence of it is concealing the reality of Hashem. He's taking us away, he's telling us, this is the real existence, there's nothing else. And there's the other side, the neshama wants to connect to Hashem, wants to get out of its limited body, it wants to get out of the prison that it's imprisoned in the physical existence. It wants to connect to its true source. Ratzu and shuv, back and forth all the time. And both of those aspects are part of our lives, are part of what has to be our lives. And that's part of the idea of the Sheishes Yamim Teyasem Alacha Uvashyem Ashviya Lachem Kodesh. 6 days we're involved in the world. In fact, the Medrash tells us, and what the Rebbe brings in the Maimer, that Sheishes Yamim Tavoid is a mitzvah essay. It's a commandment of Hashem. Do work, be involved in the world for 6 days. Go out there and be involved in the physical existence. This 7th day is Kodesh. What does Kodesh mean? Shabbos is not just Kadosh. Kadosh, we learned this earlier, means draw down the holiness of Hashem into the world. Kodesh, we say, is Milo Bigarmei. It's a word on its own. It's separate. It's totally removed from the world. It's the essence of holiness. Shabbos is when everything is elevated into its source. On Shabbos, a Jew davens. On Shabbos, a Jew learns. More than throughout the rest of the week, his entire existence is Shabbos Lashem Aleikecha. It's Kodesh. Those are the two existences that we find ourselves in. An existence of Sheishes Yamim, an existence of Yelochem Kodesh. An existence where we're in the world, and an existence where we're away from the world. And both are necessary. But then the Rebbe goes on to say, if the Torah wouldn't have told us to work, there would be no possibility to work. How can a person be in a place where Hashem is there? Man de machvi b'machi kamimalkos chayev misa, someone who's standing in front of the king, and he goes and he makes a sign of his own. He shows something of his own as if he also has something else, or as if another existence exists. He's chayev misa. He's the opposite of his entire existence because it's rebellion against the king. Hashem is everywhere. How can I go and work? How can I go and do something other than Hashem? And the answer is because Hashem said so, because this is what Hashem wants me to do. But here's where the point is. If I wouldn't have a Shabbos, and not only that, if I don't take the lesson of Shabbos into the week, if when I'm working in my mind, I see it as the reality rather than the reality that Hashem commanded. To give an example of this, there's a famous thing that the Rebbe Maharash said in his Maimer, which the Rebbe very often repeats, and that is that people think that the world is just an apparition, the world is just an imagination, a mirage. And the truth is, it's not true. It says, Bereshis bara elikim, Hashem created. The word create means something from nothing. The world is a real existence. But the real existence of the world is Bereshis bara elikim, is the fact that Hashem created it. And that's the idea. When we work, if I'm working because I think that the work is what's going to give me my livelihood, or if I work and I'm involved in the world because I think that this on its own is something, that's going against everything which is the reality of a lakus. On the other hand, when my work in the world is because the Torah told me Sheishes Yamim Taved, because Hashem told me to work, so the whole point of the work is all fulfilling the will of Hashem to be involved in the world. That's when it's proper. However, being that we are physical people, very often, despite the fact that we have a Shabbos, and despite the fact that we're involved with spirituality as well, but when it comes to the physical existence, we take it for what it is. And that's why at that time, we're told, in order that I should constantly remember that it's not the physical itself. I have to constantly remember that the physical isn't something on its own. It's teyaseh. That work is done on its own. That work isn't something which my involvement is in. It's yigiyah. And why is that? One of the ideas to understand this is based on something that Chassidus teaches us. The Gemara says that when a tzaddik sees food, or the Gemara says in general, when a person sees something that's not kosher, he shouldn't say yafshi bibsar chazir. He shouldn't say I don't like pig meat, I can't stand it. He should say no efshi. If I want to, I can eat it. But I'm not eating it not because I can't stand it, because Hashem told me not to. However, we're told that that's only the anhaga, that's only behavior for a tzaddik. A Bal Tshuva, he has to say yafshi, it's not for me. Why is that? Because since he already got involved in the world, since the world is already in existence for him, if he says efshi, I can do it, then he's going to end up chas v'sholem actually doing it. So for him, he has to say yafshi, it's not for me. He has to remove himself for it. And it's a similar concept over here. We're talking now after the Cheto Egel. What's the Cheto Egel? Avodah Zarah. What's Avodah Zarah? Avodah Zarah means, in the time of Doir Enosh, the Rambam tells us, that in the time of Doir Enosh, the people, they looked at the world and they saw that all the hashpah, everything that we get from above comes through the physical world. The mazalis, the kechav mazalis, the stars and the constellations, it comes through them. So they said, well, then we have to thank the kechav mazalis. And if we'll pray to them and if we'll thank them for what they give us, they'll give us more. They missed the point that it's only kigarzim biyad ha'chaytzev, the only existence is Hashem, and that the kechav mazalis are giving as if when a wood chopper holds an axe, it's not the wood chopper, it's not the axe that's chopping the wood. He's using it to chop, but it's the wood chopper that's chopping the wood. And the same thing, Hashem is giving the hashpah and the livelihood to the world. Only Hashem. He's giving it through the stars and the constellations. That's the concept of Avodah Zarah. The Cheto Egel was Avodah Zarah. They said, Eila lekecha Yisrael asher yitziucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. This thing which seems to be, this is the existence, this is the reality. They gave themselves over to, they fell for the fraud which is the existence of the world. How do we fix this idea of the Cheto Egel? Now it's Machras Yom Kippurim. They were just forgiven for the Cheto Egel. Moshe is saying now we have to start fixing it. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, through not bowing to the existence of the world, now you have to go deeper. Now you need Sheishes Yamim Teyasem Malacha. Now you need to make sure that when you see the world, you realize this isn't the reality. And how do you do that when your mind isn't there, when your excitement isn't there, and on the contrary, your excitement is another course, and therefore you steal time from your work in order to learn more Torah and do more mitzvahs. And when it's like that, says the Rebbe, then it will be Shabbos Shabbosin. Because if the 6 days I'm involved in work, my involvement is there in a way that I think that the reality, I bow my head, I put my mind into the physical world, then even when it comes Shabbos, I'm not going to be able to. Every Jew, Shabbos, he wants the Rasul, he wants to be connected, he wants to daven and see Elokus, he wants listakol b'yikra de Malka, to see the glory of Hashem. He wants to enjoy the Kodesh, the holiness of the Shabbos. But if 6 days a week my involvement is in a way that I see the world as the real existence, Shabbos, I also won't be able to have a Shabbos. And that's what the Torah says, Shabbos, Shabbosin. If the whole week is a bit of Shabbos, that I realize the whole week the message of Shabbos, that the reality is Elokus, then when it comes Shabbos, I'll be able to have Shabbos Shabbosin. But if not, then when I'm going to try and be involved in Shabbos, my thoughts will come into Shabbos. It has to be kol malachta chasuya. It's as if I don't have any work. But if I was so involved in the work all week, Shabbos will still be there. Not only that, the Rebbe says, I'll even have foreign thoughts that are bichlal not shaykh to me, because once the door is open for strange thoughts, everything comes in. And that's what it is. Sheishes yomim te'aseh. When it's in a way of Yigia, when my enjoyment and my pleasure, when I realize the reality of Elokus, when it comes Shabbos, it will be Shabbos Shabbos, and I'll be able to have the real and proper Shabbos.